everybody, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and together we are ThinkerThemer, and welcome back to another episode of 10, out of 10, where we rate all the games in our collection out of 10 games at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But this is a very special episode because it is a GenCon edition, so we are rating games that we picked up at GenCon.
Yes, very fresh. These are all very freshly picked up games.
Yes, and we are, honestly, we have been playing non-stop since we got home. Just any hour that we could sneak in a game, we have been, because...
I'm hungry. It's like, no, head down. You're going to play a game now.
We're playing. But that's because we are going to Essenspiel, and we know we're coming back with more games. Everyone says it's a big shopping con. I feel like I'm going to be filling our suitcases. So we want to get through these and work out which ones we want to keep in our collection.
Yes.
And also help you decide if you are going to Essenspiel, or, you know, these games are starting to drop at your local retailers, like which ones that we feel are more in line with us, or that you might like.
Which may be for you and which may not.
Yeah. So let's get into it.
Let's do it. So the first game that we're going to be looking at is Romi Rami, which is based on the Rummy type games. And it's a very, very simple game where you have a market of cards in the middle, and they all just have usually like a suit and a number. And all you're doing is you're going to be drafting cards from that, either the same number or the same suit, to a maximum of 3 cards. And you're going to be drafting those cards for the sake of to make different combinations. So you're going to have all these different goals of, for example, something might be a pair of 4s and a straight of, you know, a run of 4 numbers. Straight. I don't know. I'm using poker terms. In a run of at least 4 cards. Or another might be just 4 of a kind, or things like that. And as you're gaining those goals, they all have a little icon as well. They almost have their own icon suit, and so they'll end up going towards a majority point scoring as well. So there's all these kind of fairly simple ways of collecting points, and then at the end of the game is whoever has the most points wins.
Yeah, so it's a game about hand management, really, because you're trying to work out when you draft, and at the end of your turn you can fulfill as many contracts as you like. And so you're trying to work out, should I save up for that contract that's worth more points, or should I take the one that I know my opponent is going to grab and like go for those like smaller amounts of points on lots of contracts. So it's interesting. It's very light, I would say. This is a game that I can easily see getting to the table if you've got friends or relatives of different age groups, because it's based on some classic ideas of Rummy. The cards are very simple. There's nothing to read. It's very easy to get straight into this game. I really like the artwork on this game.
It's very simple.
It's very simple, but the little icons,
appealing.
they look like hand drawn, and they're just very cute.
I
liked this. I played this for the first time at GenCon, and then of course I've taught Maggie since we've been back. For me, it's a little bit light for my taste, so I gave it a 7.
Okay, yeah. So I'm actually going to agree with that. Like, I'll give it a 7, even though I enjoy my time with it. Obviously, it's very abstract. It's just like a Rummy type game, but it's really like, it's kind of nice, and it's pretty, and it's sort of like, so,
and it's not particularly punishing as well. You always feel like there's an option that's open to you. So even if other people are grabbing contracts, they're being refreshed all the time, and so it's likely that you can then get a different contract. So it's a nice game if that's your group. Like, you don't want something that's something that's a bit easier. And
I like that there's also 2 levels of goals. There's the goals of the immediate goal of the thing that you're fulfilling, but then the sort of end of game goal that is based on the different goals along the way. So that's a nice little kind of double tiered goal system.
Yeah, so that is Romi Rami. Next game is
the next one?
A little game called Inheritors. Now, if you watch my most anticipated list, you would know that I was really looking forward to this game because when I was reading about this game, first 2 things. Let me explain the theme just for you, Maggie. But basically, you are vying to take over control of the kingdom. The King is Dead style game where everyone is looking to impress so that they can take over as leader. It is not thematic at all.
No,
but
it's cute though. I like the cards. I like the artwork.
Yeah, the artwork is really nice. But the first thing is this game, it's a lot of game in a small box. So tiny, tiny box. But some of the cards are regular card size. Other cards take up the whole size of the box, and the bigger cards represent both public and private objectives that are going to be laid out on the table, as well as asymmetric character abilities as well that you'll have the opportunity to draft once in the game. And so it has more of a table presence, first of all, than what you would expect from a card game. The second thing is what you're trying to do in this game is you are trying to create runs or ascending sets of different suits in front of you. So in order to start a suit, you play the 1 of that suit, and then next you'll play the 2 and 3, and you are trying to build those stacks up as high as possible, because at the end of the game you're going to score the highest card. There's many other ways to score in this game, although it's a pretty low scoring game overall. But the most interesting thing, I suppose, about the mechanics of this game is the hand management element. So yeah, you are taking cards out of your hand to exchange with the market in order to try and get the cards that you need to go down on these stacks. But you only get to do one thing on your turn. And so if you play a card onto a stack, that ends your turn. And there might just be a delicious card that you want to pick up in the market.
And often you have like people going, oh, I want everything, but I have to just play this card.
Yeah. People have likened it to Lost Cities because of the fact that you're thinking about what you're going to put out into the market that the other players might pick up. I don't think it has as much tension as that game, but it certainly has a little bit of that feel in the hand management. I quite enjoy this game. I probably had overhyped it in my head just a little bit. I do that. But I've really enjoyed my time, and actually it's one that I think the more you play it, the more you really get into it, because it has a couple of fiddly rules. It's not like the simplest thing to teach, but once you actually understand those rules, they're not complex.
No.
And so once everybody around the table understands them, and we played this a lot with the 3 of us, my sister, Maggie and I, and it just became more and more satisfying, I felt, the more everyone got to know the game. And I like the little touches of, there's little cards that have different powers, like there's a spy card where if you can correctly guess a card that someone's holding in their hand, you get to take it from them. So there's a few little disruptors in there.
My favorite is a conspirator, which allows you to essentially just, as you're building your run of numbers, if you get stuck, it allows you to skip a number, and then often it's like, oh great, now I don't know how to, but the limitation of it is someone else has to have been higher than you on that suit. On that color, on that suit. So it's a nice little tension.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this game. It's a 7.5 for me. It's a little harder to get to the table just because of remembering the different rules. But once you're into it, it's really quite fun and satisfying.
That's interesting. For me, it's a bit higher. It's a 7.6. Which I enjoy my time with it.
Tiny bit higher.
I enjoy my time with it. Like every time that I'm sort of playing it, it's like it's very satisfying, very easy, obviously, to take with you. It is a little bit of a table hog. I don't know if it needs to be, because it's mostly just when you're setting up all of the quests and the other kind of character cards, which if you have limited table space, you could just kind of put them to the side or something like that. So it's potentially something that you can play in a medium sort of
difficult to play while you're traveling or something, but at the same time I think that also works for it because it has more table presence and it feels more substantial than a card game, I think, because of all of those elements.
Nice. So that was Inheritors. Now the next one is one that I did not know anything about.
I didn't know I was going to buy this until I saw it in everybody's hands, and I was like, well then clearly people know what they're doing. I should get on board with this.
So Amy found the hype train in that moment. So this is Ancient Knowledge. So in Ancient Knowledge, we are kind of collecting...
It's a civ builder. It's a civ builder. Yeah, that's how it's described.
Are you really?
Yeah.
I feel like it's more of like a monument, like monuments of history collections, and then... making sure that, okay, so this is the way it kind of works. You've got a whole range of cards that are different monuments, or a combination of different monuments throughout all sorts of different periods of history. And then also some of them are, I believe the term is artifacts, that then go onto your board that give you more permanent abilities. So as the way that you play them is kind of similar to, you some of them you can kind of play for free. Some of them will have a cost of paying a card or discarding a card or a couple of cards to play them. But the main thing about them is they all have a place. So you have a timeline on your board. They all have a place in that timeline where they sort of land, and they also have a knowledge sort of not cost, but they have a number of knowledge tokens that get put on it. And the interesting thing about it is at the end of your turn, that timeline is there's going to be a decline. So it actually progresses to the point, so it moves backwards from, I think it's like 6 is the highest number, through to 1. When a building comes off 1, then it's sort of in decline, and it kind of goes into your sort of past history area, which is great because it means that it's potentially going to be scoring points. A lot of them have points, or other scoring and scoring conditions. But those monument tokens that you put on them, any monument tokens that you didn't get to remove along the way, which I feel like it's probably the equivalent of capturing that knowledge before that monument or civilization was gone, then they become penalty points. So they end up in this sort of area of like broken kind of knowledge tokens, which is interesting because the way to try and get rid of those tokens, obviously some of the cards help you do that, but a lot of times one of the actions is to get rid of cards from your hand, to remove tokens from the like knowledge from the monuments that you have in your timeline. But the thing with this is the tension is the card management. Yes. Getting cards can be very, very difficult. Very difficult. You usually only get one at a time, unless, this is the other thing that was quite interesting, the cards that have gone into your past, you can tap them and every card that you tap will give you 2 cards, but then it stays tapped until maybe you come across an action that brings them back up. Yeah. So it's an interesting kind of tension of managing all of those elements. The mechanics here are really clever, actually. They're quite intriguing. Yeah, it is really intriguing. The puzzle itself of the fact that some cards will come into your timeline and they're at a 2, and so there's only 2 turns before they go, into history. They get archived away, and that means that you've only got 2 rounds to get rid of the knowledge tokens that are on there. And so you have to think about, what are the synergies between the number of cards that I have in my hand in order to shed those cards to get rid of that knowledge, or another power that I have that maybe is going to help me with that, versus putting a card in that might go in at 6, so it's going to be in the game for 6 rounds. And some of the cards that go in at a higher level have an ongoing ability that is only active while it's in your timeline. Yeah. And so it might allow you to build a certain type of monument for cheaper while it's in your timeline. And so you're thinking about, what is the best order to play these in? How many rounds am I going to have with each of these powers? So there's a lot to think about here, and I think that part of it is super clever. It's quite satisfying when you pull it off. The only thing, like thinking about my time with this game, one thing I will say is that it is incredibly multiplayer solitaire. Yeah. To the point that I would never... Very quiet. It's a very quiet, you're kind of only doing your own thing and that's it. But I would never want to play this with 3 or 4 players. Yeah. I just can't imagine the amount of downtime in that, because you're not really engaged with what anybody else is doing. There's no real reason to, and even when it was just Maggie and I playing, and we played this quite a lot, but it was always me on my puzzle, just simply checking in with Maggie to be like, oh, is it my turn? Yeah. The only thing I didn't mention, there's a central market of technologies as well. So that's another one of there's an element of collection, and they also kind of trigger different abilities. Some of them have points, and a lot of them have requirements that you need to have met. I guess, yes, in your Civ. So I will agree, it is a Civ builder. It's a Civ builder. In a way. It just feels very abstract. It does. Because, and what kind of civilization are you? It's a complete hodgepodge of Yeah, and I feel like that technology board is really the only place where you're interacting, as maybe someone grabs the technology before you do. But other than that, you're really playing your own game. It's your own puzzle. The second thing I thought about, so for me that is a negative, because I really love interaction. But I was enjoying my own puzzle. I just found that I was kind of living and dying by the cards that I was drawing. Yeah, and in particular, very luck dependent. Yeah, and in particular, the artifacts that go down on your board, because a lot of these give you ongoing abilities. Once you've drafted those for the game, they can't be removed. They're like the powers I've picked for this game. And sometimes I get a really great one, and that just enabled the whole thing to move a lot smoother. And then other games, I got a bad combination of cards, and then I wasn't drawing anything interesting, and I felt really stuck across a number of rounds. So I felt as though it was a little bit luck dependent on the card draw.
for me.
Yeah.
So for ancient knowledge, I gave it a 7.5. So even though those things stood out to me as things that maybe hold it back, I can't deny, for me, the mechanic. It is super intriguing, and I think a lot of people are going to find that really compelling, that timeline, and how you need to manage the knowledge that's coming in, the tapping of the cards. There's a lot to think about.
Yeah. For me, it's a 7.1. I think I did find like some of the core mechanics, they're intriguing and they're kind of satisfying as you're trying to figure them out. But yeah, there's no real, even though it's multiplayer solitaire and I don't mind that, there's no, like, it never really felt thematic. A lot of the monuments and stuff, what they do, I think if there is a thematic link, it just felt very, very faint. A lot of times it's very abstracted in terms of like, these are different suits of colors of types of monuments, and then that's sort of it.
And I liken it to, we recently reviewed Forest Shuffle, another game where you're relying on combos of cards, but because of the theme, it makes such thematic sense why I would want to have one of that type of card, like an insect and a frog. They have some kind of synergy together, or like, there's different synergies, whereas this, I never quite grasped why one suit was better than the other. I started to work it out, but it's not intuitive.
No, not at all.
And so that made it quite difficult to work out, like, very quickly without reading all the cards, like, what the best combos would be.
There's also a lot more agency in something like Forest Shuffle, because as people are discarding, that becomes a market of cards, so you have options to actually shape your strategy, whereas this, you're drawing blind from a deck.
It really relies on just drawing a good card.
All right, so it's ancient knowledge. And then we go to another Civilizations one of World Wonders. Another hodgepodge of all the monuments in there.
Yeah, exactly. Lots of different civilizations are represented in this game. World Wonders is a polyomino tile placement game. So everybody is going to start with the same map in front of them, which is basically just like a bit of terrain. It has some water in it that causes you some issues. But what you're going to be doing is you're going to be building out different buildings represented by polyomino tiles of different colors. And the way that there's a lot of placement rules around having adjacent buildings that are of the same color or that are next to a road. And so you're also going to be building out this road that kind of connects all the buildings in your city, which makes thematic sense, I suppose. But then you're also going to be trying to strive for the world wonders, hence the title of the game. And these world wonders, and the key selling point of this game, is that there are these incredible mini versions of different world wonders from around the world. So you've got the pyramids, you've got the Great Wall of China, and these are all represented by these really chunky wooden replicas of these buildings.
It's also
like to scale.
Non-historical things, like more like fantastical kind of things as well. So it's a big mix,
It's a big mix, yes. But basically there will be a condition that you need to meet on your puzzle board in order to draft one of those wonders before everybody else can, and place them down onto your board. So it might need to be next to a green building and a road, for example, and as soon as you've got that combo and you've got the space to put it down, you can take that wonder and put it down, and that's going to give you extra victory points. The other thing, one mechanic that I liked about this game is every round you have 7 coins, and you can spend those as frivolously. Wow.
That's a hard word.
It is a hard word. You can spend as much or as little of those coins each turn as you like, but once you're out of coins, you're out of the round. And so you want to be spending it wisely. So maybe you want a really big polyomino tile building, but that's going to cost you 5 coins, and then you're only going to have 2 left to maybe purchase some road. So you've got to be careful about managing that. And interestingly, when you build a wonder, it costs you the remainder of your coin. So if you do it early in the round, then it's going to cost you, either way, it's going to cost you all your coins, but you might want to do it earlier in order to draft it before somebody else does. So that's really the dynamic of the game. You can also take out a loan and get a couple of extra coins, but you need to pay it back. But that's really the crux of the game. I found in this game that I was so drawn to the world wonders. And the world wonders are the best part of the puzzle because they present you with a quite difficult challenge
Yeah.
of having to set up your board in a certain way.
I really struggle with them, like to the
Yeah,
point
you
where
did.
I'm like, for some reason, like I love polyomino sort of tiled games, but it's just because it's got those particulars, like, okay, it needs to be this type of terrain with this, and then these adjacencies, and so there's so many steps before that I just, by the time I go, I think I've kind of got it, someone else has claimed it.
Yeah, Maggie
So,
did struggle. I don't think across all the games we played, I don't think Maggie drafted that many at all. But that brings me to my critique of this game.
You may not need them.
That often Maggie would win this game completely ignoring the world wonders.
Yeah.
And this...
I think I did one with I won one that had one wonder.
But you know what's frustrating about this is that in order to set up your board, you need to be like, okay, I need a green building first. And I can put that green... So there's like a sequence of like, okay, I need to get that building and build that road, and then I can get that wonder. So it takes quite a few turns to build up to getting a wonder. Sometimes you might get lucky and it'll just fit on your board. But most of the time, you're working towards it. And, we played this with my sister, and her and I are very competitive with each other. And so we were both eyes on, the world wonders. We both wanted to build them. And her and I are having this kind of fight over world wonders, and Maggie's just off there doing the regular puzzle with just coloured polyomino tiles.
The thing is, there's other objectives as well for the end of the game.
Oh, in the advanced variant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was when we started playing the advanced variant. But I still felt like we were doing well. I guess my critique of this game is that the most appealing component of it and the most difficult part of the puzzle, the world wonders, as you admit yourself, very difficult to do.
It is very difficult.
There's not a big enough payoff. I just didn't feel like
You can ignore them. You can just have a nice civilization. Like your nice little kind of board. Like my board had very little raced areas.
Exactly.
And Amy
and it's beautiful when you build it out.
It is really beautiful. You have all those different buildings that make no sense being all together right next to each other.
I know.
But it is really beautiful. And it's but it's hard work.
It's hard work, and then it doesn't pay off. So I wasn't happy with the small amount of points that are related to the world wonders. I really do love there's parts of this production value that I love and others that I really dislike. The first thing I love, obviously, the wonders. They've done a great job of that. You can see that probably most of the production money has gone into making those wonderful. But the rest of it is the graphic design and the vibrancy of the choice of the tiles and things. Like, I understand that it's trying to give off this ancient vibe, but it left me feeling a bit meh. And the biggest critique I probably have is this setup and tear down of this game.
Yeah.
Because you need to sort the polyomino tiles by shape, because they're going to be in piles in the market. It is a pretty frustrating game to put back together and then to set up again. It takes a little bit too much time, and I feel like with that barrier, it's not going to get to the table. And the fact that the most interesting thing to me, it's just not paying off. That it just kind of left me feeling a bit.
I didn't mind so much the graphic design of it. Like I was kind of happy enough with the color saturation of it, and even just what it was. It's still that kind of beigey sort of. It's not like popping. Oh my goodness, But it was fine for me. I felt like I did enjoy the puzzle of on your board. As you're playing those polyomino pieces, they have different icons on them that move these different tracks. Completely abstract. There's absolutely no real full thematic kind of link between them. But then it's interesting that as some of those tracks are moving along, you're triggering increases in population, which is ultimately the thing that finishes the game, triggers end the game, or one of the conditions. But the other thing is, we didn't really mention, and this is the other thing, the lowest of those tracks, it also ends up being one of the other scores. So the other thing that I was sort of making sure of was keeping all of those tracks moving along, which is something they can kind of let your eye
but I feel like that's not very new.
No,
so
it's not.
I don't feel like that's introducing anything super new and interesting. And I think we should take your themer card off you for liking those tracks.
Wait, no, we haven't rated it. Haven't rated it.
Oh yes, the rating. That's probably pretty important.
That's why you're here.
That's why we're here. For me, it's a 6.8. I feel as though I'm not going to get it to the table.
Interesting.
The puzzle I thought was actually challenging. The puzzle itself is challenging. I just wish there was more of a payoff and an easier way to set it up and tear it down.
So I think you may have to remove my themer card. It's a 7 for me, so it's a little bit higher for me. Yeah. I must say though, her sister loved it. So it is a, just player preference.
She really likes a difficult puzzle, and it was that. I just felt like, we have a lot of difficult puzzles, so I need it to be something...
You need it to really, truly
and
shine.
get to the table quickly. Anyway.
All right. let's talk about Sagrada
Artisans.
This was one that we were really anticipating, and we had been waiting for, and we had a copy
that was so shiny. I love
so shiny. That's the box is beautiful. It's massive. I did not expect it to be this big. And we are not really we have Sagrada, the game, but it's not a game that really
didn't connect with us.
We didn't really connect with it, so we were kind of hoping, maybe this will be the thing that changes it all, because it's now a kind of roll and write or roll and draw color in. So you're now, it's going to be this sort of relaxing kind of experience. So in Sagrada Artisans, this is a campaign. Is it a campaign or technically legacy? Because you are going to be destroying things, and things are going to be obviously getting revealed and changed along the way. And it's essentially kind of looking at the history of the creation of La Sagrada Familia, the church, La Sagrada Familia. And so, obviously we don't want to give any spoilers, but you're kind of competing artisans creating the different stained glass windows.
I think that, so in the original Sagrada, you are drafting die, a die on your turn of different colors, and then you're placing them down into your puzzle. Basically, the coloring in component replaces the placement of that die onto your puzzle, so you're just coloring it in to indicate which die you are drafting. Every player is going to have a book. So it plays up to 4 players. Maggie and I played through the entire game. We have finished this game. Just the 2 of us. And you're playing through this book, and each page in the book, without any spoilers, is a different puzzle. So you are basically building out the different stained glass windows, and every puzzle has different conditions. There are envelopes that you're going to be opening. There are crates that you're going to be opening. And there is a deck of cards that is driving the story forward. So you are reading an intro and an outro at the end of every chapter. And then there are different cards that are going to give you different abilities, goals, and things like that. So, classic legacy style game. Did it change our opinion of Sagrada? Unfortunately, it didn't. But there are many reasons that I want to talk through about this game, because at its core, the book that you're working through.
So everyone gets their own puzzle book, with all the different puzzles in it.
The book that you're working through is interesting. The puzzles, they get increasingly harder as you would want. They get increasingly more interesting as you would want. But I suppose as a reviewer, I'm reviewing the total package of what this game sets out to do, and the legacy style of it. So the envelopes that you're opening, I didn't feel as though they were adding a lot above and beyond what was being added by the book. So if it had been a set of books that you could work through and didn't need to necessarily be in this giant box with all the envelopes and bits and pieces, I would have been almost equally as satisfied with the game. And then there's a couple of other elements. The game gets slowed down a lot compared to the original Sagrada, because instead of just, as I mentioned, taking a die and placing it on your board, you're now taking it and then you're colouring in. And the colouring in was the draw card for this, because I wanted to have this evening relaxing experience where it, you kind of got that cartographer's feel of relaxed, and it didn't quite play out like that. And we've been reflecting on this a lot, because I feel as though it wasn't quite as relaxing for a number of reasons. One, it was a bit slow. So the things that you're colouring in are quite big spaces. And so
big plain sort of spaces.
Big
so you're
squares,
just
big triangles, especially for the first half of the puzzles. The stained glass window is not that interesting. There are spaces around it that you can colour in while you're waiting for your turn.
That was probably the best bit, because Amy might be taking her time, and I'm just okay, I'm just going to be colouring in the edges, the designs around the edges. That was probably more
and then in a 2-player game, there's also a bit of downtime in I don't know how much of this is a spoiler, but I won't talk about the board where you're placing the dice, but essentially you're rolling it and then you're placing the dice out in a way that makes it easier to draft. I don't know as well if that was just adding more. It felt like more admin time. It felt like once our turns were over, basically each puzzle probably overstayed its welcome.
Yeah,
a little bit.
every puzzle is like
long.
by the halfway point, I'm like, I'm ready for this to be over. Like I'm ready for this to just now be completed.
Yeah. And then so that's one element. The other element is just the sheer amount of waste in this game.
Yeah.
I found like in other legacy games that's always an issue, and
there's stuff that you're destroying and things that only kind of see the light of day for a little bit, and then it's like, get rid of this. And it's like, okay.
And that's not the best from a environmental perspective. We have to be more conscious of that, and we are more conscious of that. And this game felt more wasteful. Like there are other games where it's like you're having such a big experience of it that it's like, okay, well, I can see why we generated all this waste was to create this like bigger feel. This didn't quite have the payoff. There was a lot of rubbish that was being generated in each level that sometimes came into the game just for that one level and then was immediately thrown out of the game, and it left me with a bit of a sad feeling. And
it almost didn't feel like it was necessary.
Yes,
like it was sort of adding, because it wasn't actually adding that much excitement to the gameplay, or it definitely wasn't drastically changing anything that you're really doing in the game. So then it sort of feels very samey, and then even though it's almost like it's like
everything that you're opening was peripheral to the main puzzle, and the puzzle changing was the best part of it. So if it was just the books and the puzzle changing, I would have been equally as happy with the gameplay.
You kind of didn't need, I didn't really feel like any of the other stuff really added that much, if anything, really.
And two other minor points that are probably important to mention as well is that the rule set was a little bit confusing and hard to follow, probably more than it should have been especially at the simpler puzzle end of the game. And the second thing is the color matching of the pencils with some of the pre-printed colors were off enough that it confused us a couple of times. So there were a couple of production elements that hopefully will be fixed with a second edition. And then let's talk about the story. So, obviously there are
no spoilers.
No, but there are nods to what happened historically, and it follows like the timeline of building out the Sagrada Familia. But I felt like overall the tone was pretty negative. So it was a bit like reprimanding you, or
like grumpy, fighty, angry boss.
It was a weird tone.
And
I think it was particularly jarring with the idea of a mindful colouring in experience. And so I was like getting, where I'm reading this out aloud and we like try and immerse ourselves as much as possible. And it just felt a bit like, I don't know.
It was more tortured than artist.
Yes, it was.
Like it was more the tortured bit than the art. Like it,
Anyway, we've harped on about this enough. I feel like if you're a fan of Sagrada, of course this is going to be more appealing to you. So please take our opinions with a grain of salt. That
very subjective.
The core puzzle is like okay to us, and so probably it's just a lot of that. But then the legacy component, I feel like it didn't deliver like other legacy games, because there have been other legacy games that have, I feel like, delivered on that surprise and delight of the opening of envelopes. So this just felt
an
more
evolution. Like it never really felt like a big evolution from game to game. It's like a very slight, like a maybe 15% change and shift. But for a legacy where you're destroying things, you kind of want more shifts.
I want to talk about as well the lasting components in this game. So you cannot replay this game, but it does come with a booster pack, but it's not really a booster pack to allow you to play the campaign. It's just like you can use the same components to play this deck of puzzles as an extra add-on. And yes, that does of course extend the game, but it doesn't allow you to pass on this. And it's still, there is so much waste generated, particularly if you play it as two players. Of course, there's all the other player components. So a lot of waste, and I have to rate it accordingly. I gave this a 6.2.
Yes, I agree. It's a 6.2 for me as well, because it did not connect. I think it did actually make me like the base game more, because like now I appreciate how easy it is to just like grab a die and like put it there and it's sort of done. The coloring in, unfortunately, which I was hoping was going to be the draw card, was actually part of what slowed everything down. And yeah, it wasn't.
My favorite part was actually the last couple of puzzles, just because of the level of difficulty. They were quite difficult, and I enjoyed that because then it felt like my brain was kicking into gear. But again, it was still about what was on the page rather than all of the rest of the
accoutrement was really kind of felt almost superfluous.
All right, let's move into a more positive space. Seas of Strife is a little card game that I picked up because we had played it at Leader Games office. Brooke had taught it to us, and this has beautiful Beth Sobel art. It is a game that has actually just been reskinned and the rules reprinted, because this is really interesting. Before Rio Grande Games, there was another publisher that published it, and they published it with the wrong rules. So they actually had a different rule set to what the designer originally intended. But the game became popular with the wrong rule set. But when they published this edition, they used the right rules, but they included the wrong rules as a variant. And I just found that so fascinating to read.
Very amusing,
because they detailed all of that in the variant rules, why they're in there. But we've been playing this with the real rules, or the rules as intended.
The official design.
The official rules. Yeah. And this is a trick-taking game where the idea is to take no tricks.
Very simple.
You do not want to take any tricks the whole time, but the cards are really interesting because there are no duplicate numbers. The cards across the suit run from, I think, 0 to 74, and every suit has a different portion of those numbers. So the suits themselves are ascending in values. And in this game, it is must follow. So you must follow the lead suit. But what's really interesting is the twist in this game, because if you can't follow suit, because you don't want to win tricks, your motivation is to shed the highest cards in your hand, because you don't want to win tricks.
Classic trick-taking move.
Exactly.
Oh, thank goodness. Off suit, I'm going to get rid of one of these high cards.
Yeah, I'll play the 74. Yeah. But what's interesting is if other people can't follow suit and they also play off suit, and the off suit becomes a majority suit, i.e. the most played suit on the equal or most played suit on the table, the dynamics shift. And if there's more of that other suit than there was the lead suit, it becomes the trump suit, and now that 74 that you shed, that just won the trick.
And it's highest card of that new trump suit.
If it's a tie between the lead suit and the people playing off suit, then it becomes the highest number. So the number you're playing is also really interesting. But because of this, when you are going after someone who's played off suit and you can also play off suit, there is a real desire to mess with their game.
Really
I had to think about the language I used.
Sabotage.
Sabotage, that's right. So you're like, haha, I'm also going to play off suit, and you just won a trick you weren't expecting to. And that's it. It's a very simple dynamic, and for that reason, I have gotten this to the table so
You really have.
much.
You love playing that game.
I love playing this game because it's super easy to teach. It's really satisfying in the way that it plays out, and it still has those like laughable kind of moments where, you know, there's always someone in the game that ends up saying, was the goal of this game to collect suits? And everybody laughs because...
Inevitably, you have someone that's just like, no matter what they do, they're just gaining, like they're just winning trick after trick. And they're like,
there's one other little dynamic that if you win a trick with the highest card in that suit, you get to choose who leads the trick. And that can be very strategic depending on whether it's early in the round or later in the round. Because later in the round, you do not want to lead. But anyway, really interesting little game. I really love Seas of Strife. It's a great game. It's a 7.9 for me. It's probably light filler style, but just like throwing this in your backpack, teaching different generations of games.
It'd be higher the way you were talking about
I know. But it's like, ultimately for me, it's like, you know, I want it to be a more satisfying thing, but it's getting a very high score because it's just accessibility.
Okay, for me it's a 7.6. I enjoy my time with it, but it's like, it's fine. You know, I love the artwork, but it's nice. It's a pleasant experience every time, but not like, oh my god, I can't wait to play it. It's like, it's fine.
I like the artwork too. Beth Sobel did a great job of like depicting kind of the the worst and worst scenarios of like that yacht getting into trouble.
Yeah, trouble
sailing.
The strife that you're encountering. Yeah, so as the suits progress, the strife gets worse.
Gets worser.
Gets real.
The next game is a little game called Number Drop. That was not on our radar at all. We were provided, AEG gave this to us. They gave us a range of their new games, but this one was a surprise.
It really was.
It really was. We were like, okay, Tetris game, roll and write.
I saw the explanation of this and I was like, I watched like a video that had the explanation. I was like, I don't get it. I'm like, I did not understand it at all. And that was very strange for me because I love Tetris sort of things.
Yeah, I was like,
and it is very much like a Tetris, you know, it's like it's
pretty abstract.
It's very, very abstract.
In the best way, because Tetris is awesome.
Then eventually, did you learn it? I think you learned it.
I learned it and I was like, it's really not that difficult.
Like, what's going on? It's not that difficult.
It's not that difficult.
But
numbers are more my thing, color is more Maggie's thing. Yes. As soon as a puzzle has color in it, I'm
no color in this. Like the only color, there's color, I like the dice, like the color of the dice. They're very chunky, very satisfying, very colorful and kind of translucent, which is kind of cool. But there's no color on the board. It's a very kind of muted.
How does it work?
How does it work? So you're essentially going to be taking turns rolling the dice. The dice will have a combination of numbers, so 4 different numbers, and one of the die will be a shape, so a polyomino type shape. And so what you'll have to do is you'll be allocating those shapes Tetris style somewhere on your kind of like the bottom of your Tetris board. And what you're aiming for is either runs or same of a kind for either to hit either, I think the lowest is 3, so at least like a run of 3s or a 3 of a kind, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8. So you kind of initially try, or this is what I try and do, as you're placing them, you're trying to look for using the shape. So you're using the shape to put for the location of the numbers, but then you're also looking at the adjacency of the numbers to try and create those runs and those same of a kind. And I actually found that puzzle quite interesting.
It is interesting. It's not easy
as well. It's not easy.
And it's not easy because you're also trying to fill rows. So like classic Tetris style, you want to maximize the number of rows that you're going to be getting in the game. But then thinking about, okay, so if I put that puzzle piece there, I'm going to complete the row, but then I really want to put it over there because I've already got 2 1s and this will be my other 2 1s. I can match them up.
Make a set of 4.
But what's interesting is as you make those sets, so you have to make difficult decisions about making sets of numbers because you're going to circle them. And once they're used for a particular combination, you cannot use them again. And so you end up with numbers that have been essentially marked off that are not going to help you obtain those bigger runs or bigger sets. And the reason why you might decide to call it early and take a smaller set of numbers is because there is this you're crossing off whether you've got like a set or a run of numbers.
Yeah, which is also going to be the points at the end. So if for every, for the set of 3s, you're going to get 3 points. For the run of 3, you're going to get 3 points. You can only do that once.
Yeah, but if you get the set of 3 and the run of 3, you can then load up a penalty piece that is going to cause your opponent a lot of strife because Strife again.
I know there is. It's an ongoing theme.
It's a thing. Because once that's loaded, then when a star gets rolled, which is the wild on the dice, basically anyone who hasn't achieved that combination of things is going to get one of the penalty pieces that have been randomly allocated during the setup for the game, and they're going to have to place that puzzle piece onto their board, and it's just going to have X's in it. So it can still help you complete a row, but it's not going to contribute at all to your sets and runs. Yes.
Yeah.
I think we've explained that now.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
So you're keeping an eye on your opponent as well.
Well, you are.
Yeah.
I can never keep an eye on anything beyond my own board. Yeah. So I actually found it surprisingly satisfying and surprisingly tricky and very, very simple. So I really like the chunky die as well. So what did you give
I gave it 7.4. It's actually one of my more liked implementations of Tetris. I like the idea of it it because everyone kind of knows how to play Tetris. And so when you're thinking about imagining how that piece is falling down, that's not difficult. But the number thing is super challenging.
Yeah.
And I just found like it was a really nice, like, even though there's that penalty piece that you can give to other people, it's not super devastating, but it does create a little bit more tension in the order in which you do things.
Yeah.
And I just thought there was enough tension in it, but it was still like an easy breezy roll and write.
For me, it's a 7.2. I actually, really enjoy my time with it. Even though, it's obviously, super actual. I really like Tetris. And it was, I agree, it's like probably one of the best Tetris-like implementations I've seen on a board game format. Oh, for humors!
4 humors. Maggie's already getting happy and excited about.
So for humans, this is such a quirky game. So in this game, you are trying to influence the different citizens of this village to essentially go to different places of the board. And all of that really is just because there's sets of objectives that you want to achieve of having. For example, might be, now I'm sort of going to be making stuff up because I can't remember the exact objectives, but it's like bridge connections. So like your tokens connected in sort of parts of the island that are connected by a bridge, or tokens that are not connected by a bridge, or whatever it is, or one in every kind of little continent. And so the way those tokens eventually end there is that you have these scenes on the side, which are like little kind of picturesque little scenes with all these different characters, and the characters will have a little circle with 2 different moods that can be that you can use to influence them. So you have these little potions, so they're little round tokens, and you have 3 that are kind of private, only you know what they are, and you're going to be placing them face down, matching. They have to match one of the 2 options for each of those characters. So you might have a character that's a soldier, and the soldier might have the sword as one of their icons, and the other icon might be an hourglass. And so you might go, "Ooh, I'll put the sword there," and I might say, "Oh, I'm going to be very patient here. I'm going to have my hourglass." So you can do a little bit of like table talk and sort of mislead or bluffing. Yeah. And ultimately, what will happen is when he gets to, I can't remember how many, when you get to score, depending on how many scenes have been completed, you're going to reveal the tokens that have been placed there from all for all different players, and you can play actually multiple tokens into the same place as well. And then there's a hierarchy of those tokens. So, for example, if someone played a sword and there's only one sword, then the sword wins.
Yeah, if they're the only person that put a sword down.
But all of a sudden, if there's another sword, the swords lose, and then it goes to the next hierarchy, which is, I believe, the 2 hearts. So if there's 2 hearts, then the 2 hearts would win.
And when it's a heart, I love that because you are looking for your matching heart, and so you place it down, and you could be bluffing or could be telling the truth, where you're like, I'm putting a heart down, so if anyone wants to get on board with that, we could win this together.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they don't believe you, and they never believe me.
Yeah.
But.
And then it kind of goes on like that. So then there's like, the books, and then the hourglass and whatnot. And so that's a fun little reveal, going, oh, what happened there? And then whoever wins gets to place those tokens in the scene, or the location that scene kind of refers to. So that's how you end up getting your tokens on the board.
Which is interesting, because if you go sword strong, for example, then all of those swords, and you're winning, those swords are going onto the board, and they are being removed from your bag. And so you're diluting your bag in different ways as well. And so you can kind of, if you were someone who could card count, you could basically...
That would be hard.
No, but you could definitely keep track of, that person's played a lot of hearts. So what's the odds that this time they're also playing a heart?
You could, in theory. I don't have the mental capacity to do anything remotely like that. But anyway, so you're doing that. The other thing is there's all these other little side scenes as well that are kind of ongoing throughout the game, where you're also kind of getting to place, if what you're wanting to play doesn't really match any of the scenes that you've got there, that's another area which will also kind of get resolved, and that can actually be a good source of points, or moving things into the board. So it's I'm not going to say it's very simple, because it actually is the kind of game, because there's like a 1, 2, and then 3, and then that's still going for these other objectives. It's probably the type of game that takes at least one full game to go, I think I've got it. The first game, it's going to be really kind of muddled as you're making your way through. But I absolutely, like, it's got all the things that I don't enjoy in games.
Yeah.
Bluffing, which is a very minor component, you can completely avoid it, and I kind of tend to avoid it anyways. It's got area majority, which I don't enjoy either. It's got a little bit of deduction in a way, because you're kind of going, oh, well, if there's only these possible symbols there. So all of the things that I don't enjoy, and yet I am so delighted every time I play this game, and I'll tell you why. It's mostly, entirely probably, because of those scenes, like the little scenes of those little characters. It's so thematic. Like, even though it's a fairly, like, the game itself is, it's fun. The things that would influence those characters and the scene that's being depicted makes so much sense. And it's like, I just enjoy, looking at that story and going, oh, look at these royals, and are they going to be lovers? Or one of them's going to betray, or they're both going to betray each other, and then no one. And so I just thought it was so amusing that so much whimsy was captured in those
very
scenes
quirky.
That just gives me so much fuel throughout the entire game. So I really enjoy it.
Even the For Humor is a game of wits and guts. Like, the language that is used through it is very, like, tongue-in-cheek.
Illustrations are so cute.
Yeah, it is really cute. It's very thematic. With my time in this game, I found I probably loved my first game the most, and as I continued to play it, I found like it became a little bit more procedural as it went on. So I guess the initial game had a lot of those moments of like I didn't expect that of you, and then I feel like the more I played it, especially with the same group, it just became like, let's just reveal and then like do all the admin kind of thing. So it didn't quite have as much table talk. The bluffing element didn't come into it quite as much as I would have wanted, I think, because I quite like those dynamics. Maggie doesn't like them so much, and I usually love like an area majority kind of thing. And then I felt like without that, it became a little bit like I didn't have control over my own destiny. Yes, I can choose what I put down there, but at the reveal part, I felt like there wasn't a lot of strategy for me there. Like, I was just like, oh, okay, I lose again. Like,
like my experience was different, because one, I was obviously very delighted by, the little stories that I was telling.
Yeah.
But then it became a lot more, I felt like the mitigation was around the deduction, because you have, what are the possible options that can go into that board. And you can put multiple, so over different turns, you can put multiple tokens into the board. So sometimes what I might do is I might actually sabotage myself. So for example, I put a sword, and I know I don't want myself to win as a sword, because it's a bit, and so there's a lot, so I'll put a second sword so that I know, and then it means that I have a third, option there. So there's a lot more strategy, and it becomes more almost like a multiplayer solitaire of kind of going mitigating risk and deduction, and then also those other things on the side felt like they gave me a lot of options, which you didn't really tend to use. In games you don't really tend to like have used those as much. Yeah, and I always go for those because they give you a lot of freedom.
Yeah, and I think this game is definitely, if you understand the risk orientation of the players around the table, you can kind of guess what they might do. And so that part of it is fascinating to me, because you can probably always guess that I'm attempting to have the one sword. Whereas Maggie, I know, is much more patient than I am. And so she's probably not going for the aggressive option.
No. I'll usually try and go for sabotaging that aggressive option and having one of the lower down the chain options.
So for humors, I really like the theme, the quirkiness. I gave it a 7.4. It probably doesn't have quite as much mechanical appeal for me long term, but I really appreciate all the little touches.
This is an 8.2 for me. I love this game. Oh my goodness. And then when I learned that apparently, like, the designer is a musician as well, a composer, and there's little kind of bits of music, like sort of
in the background.
And apparently those are actual pieces of his music. So I'm like, I wish I could read music that way so I could play them and see what little tune there is in that scene. I love that game.
Okay, here comes another impulse purchase by Amy. This is Sunrise Lane, and there are two reasons why I picked this up at GenCon. The first is that it's by Horrible Guild, and I feel like they do quirky, interesting designs, usually with good production value. And then the designer is Reina Knizia, which is obviously always usually a good time, usually an interesting scoring mechanic of some
there's
type.
always something interesting.
Yeah.
Even if it's a hit or a miss, there's always like I see what you did there.
I see that. I see that. And this one is super simple. In fact, you can teach this so quickly. Basically, everybody has a hand of cards. They're going to start with 3, but the max is 5. And you are going to be playing cards of different suit colors that represent different areas on the board that you're going to be building on. And the number of cards you play determines the level of the houses that you're going to be placed. So everybody
They're stackable little
stack on
houses.
top of each other. So you have a number of plastic houses, and you are trying to basically play a couple of different area majority games. In 2 of the corners, you just want to have as many houses as possible. You want to have all the houses on all the streets. In the other 2 corners of the board, you want to have the highest level of house and the most of the highest level. So in the other corners, you want to play 3 or 4 cards at a time, because then you can create those like multi-level houses. And then there's a final objective, which is you want to have the longest chain of your own houses. But there's a couple of things that make this interesting. One, depending on where you place it, so it has to be the right color to place the right house on the board, there are a number of pips shown on the board, or dots shown on the board, and that's going to multiply out a score depending on the height of the house. So if you put it on a 4, say a red 4, but then I put a double level house on there, then it's 2 times 4, and I'm just going to immediately score 8 points. And so there are a couple of dynamics here. You are thinking about where's the best place to go to achieve those overall objectives, but where am I going to get the best immediate points as well, based on the fact that actually you can only build adjacent to another house or park that's already been built on the board. And so it's like, well, Maggie's just like led me right up to that juicy 5 over there. So instead of doing my objective I was going to try and do over there, I'm going to go over there and grab those quick points, put a 3 stack there, get 15 points.
But a big limitation is that you only have a maximum of 5 cards at any given point. So
But also the parks. The parks are one of the most interesting parts of this puzzle, because they are just single squares that can be used once per turn, if you like, by spending any one card to put a park down that covers a space. And you might do this for a number of reasons. One, and most usefully probably, is you want to access a space that is currently inaccessible, but you don't have the right card to play on one of the on that area. So you cover it with a park, which allows you to skip it. The other is that you might have just uncovered a really high scoring point area and you don't want your opponents to take it. So I've just led you all the way to the 5. I don't want you to take that. So I'm going to cover it.
Hate build a park.
Hate build a park. That's an interesting concept. But essentially, this game plays out really quickly. It's really simple to teach. And
it is, if you could imagine, a simplified version of Ticket to Ride, because it's like you still have that thing of like, you're kind of playing the same color to match, a particular area. And then depending on how many you place, how many, like the height of it. But in Ticket to Ride, you're kind of limited to like, if I want to do that route, then I need to have, that number of cards, essentially, that number of kind of cars to put in there. Whereas here, it's like you can just have one, and you can just have a level 1.
Get a score of 1.
So it's a lot faster. So I feel like this is an even more accessible,
and it ends
very quick.
It ends in a similar way to Ticket to Ride too, because the game ends once a player has 2 or fewer houses left over. And so that means if you are building lots of like lower value houses, because on your turn you can build as many houses as you're able to with the cards in your hand, then maybe you get to catch up a little bit and end the game while you're ahead. So that's an interesting dynamic as well. It's mainly the scoring conditions that exist on the corners of the board, I feel, that really drive a lot of the strategy, because they are worth, if you win one of those corners, they are worth an extra 10 points at the end of the game. So super simple.
And then longest connection as well. So like longest connection of your own.
10 points.
So I think that the challenge of this is going to be, there's not, unless they bring in expansions and things like that, which I don't feel like they will.
No.
The longevity of it, it's like it's the same game over time. So it is meant to be like a much more lighter, very quick to the table, almost like a satisfying filler.
It is a filler, definitely a filler. And I feel like the price point of this game is maybe pushing it a bit out of where it actually sits as a game.
Gameplay-wise.
Yeah, gameplay-wise. I also feel like the box size is doing it a disservice as well. Yes, there are a lot of plastic houses in there, but if there was a way that it could be in a smaller, like even half, like the size of the box, then it would fit that filler need much, I'd be more inclined to keep it, I suppose.
Yeah.
At the moment, I want to keep it because I actually really enjoy how fast you can get it to the table, and it's just like literally a warm-up before we get into something heavier.
Yeah.
But at the moment, it's like, I don't know, that takes up a lot of shelf space.
Yeah, the box really oversells it as a much more complex experience than it actually is. But it is like it is a fun and satisfying, very, very
Super
accessible.
simple.
Like I'm saying, more accessible than Ticket to Ride sort of experience.
Yeah.
But not because the tension is a bit less. Yeah, the longevity is probably not a match to Ticket to Ride.
Yeah.
What's a scoring for that?
I still really like it. I gave it a 7.5.
I'm going to match that. Yeah, I'm going to say 7.5 is I would agree with that. It's satisfying. It's an interesting. Yeah.
Do you need to go and seek it out? Maybe not, but like it's probably better as a simple filler puzzle than I expected it to be.
And quite fast. Quite fast.
I don't really want it to be more than that.
Yeah.
I would just want the box to be less than that.
Ooh, and for last,
I'll leave this one to Maggie.
Eila. Is it Eila?
Eila.
Eila.
Every time.
Every time. I'm going to blame it on my English as a second language. Eila and Something Shiny. This is one of those games that I was so looking forward to because it is a solo, it says 1+, because you could kind of play it a couple of people just kind of like together making decisions.
Yeah, and I did say that I thought this was like a 2-player co-op, but really it's like a 1-player and you can come along on the journey.
Exactly. You can kind of sit together and discuss and kind of share.
Yeah.
But it's really meant to be like a solo narrative experience. Very, very... it's interesting because it is a narrative tale, but it's not endless reading. You're not reading like endless passages and things like that. It's really like a choose your own adventure type game. So in this game, obviously, it's a campaign game. It's non-destructive, which I actually really liked about this. So as soon as you finish it, and it's a game that you'll probably play multiple times because it's so hard. so that's one thing that I'll say. Don't be deceived by the cute little bunny. It is hard. Even playing it on like the basic sort of easy, not expert mode, just like basic difficulty, it is challenging. So there's not that many chapters to get through, but to pass a chapter, it is quite tricky. The whole game is really largely resource management. So you start out with a bit of a, you've got sort of a bit of a mission. So each chapter will start with a little bit of an intro of story to set the scene. There's not a lot of text to read, so it's like a little bit of text. A lot of it is comic style, so it's really graphic novel driven narrative, which I loved about this. And then you have these different cards, so these different decks of cards that are kind of color coded again. So some of them are kind of going to be like your basic adventure, and then the others are going to be events that happen along the way. So as you reveal one of your cards to kind of start off on your adventure, it's going to give you options, and depending on the options that you take, it's either you're going to either gain resources or pay resources to get a different benefit. You also have limits of storage in terms of the resources that you can keep, and you have like tangible resources like carrots and coins and magical stars that you can get, or intangible, which I really love. It's like you have fear and what do you call it? It's like, oh my goodness, the green ones. It's like energy or knowledge. And even those are kind of limited what you can hold at any given time. Those work super well in terms of at the points, thematically, the points that you use them for, what you're using them for, and what they actually make, how they make the story go forward. The other interesting thing is, as you're making your decisions, it means that either some events will be added to your future deck, which kind of goes face down and you don't know what that's going to be, or some events will just be discarded to your past. And so then you're essentially, throughout a game, you're creating the deck for your next round. And then that deck will kind of get shuffled, and also along the way you're kind of you're learning different either abilities or gaining different objects that you can use throughout like your different challenges and stuff. So So a few things I'll say. That was really, really satisfying. The core mechanic of that resource management works really, really well. That past, present, future of the deck works really, really well. The way the story is sort of told throughout, the fact that it's so like graphic novel driven works excellent. Resource management, loved it. Super difficult.
You also, difficult, but you also mentioned to me that every chapter is very different.
Yes, so every chapter, because the whole thing is a journey, every chapter plays out quite different. The core thing plays out the same, but the modules that come into play and the things that you're kind of or looking at are very, very different. So that actually also added to this sense of like, I'm going on this journey and I'm encountering all these completely different scenes and settings. And so that I absolutely loved. So so up to this point, I'm going to say the whole thing is that Eila sees something shiny and it's like, I must go. And that's what sets the journey going. Yeah. The journey is going to be the best thing about this because I love that journey. The destination was, to say disappointing and a letdown is probably an understatement. What I'm gonna say about this is, again, this is very subjective. I did not enjoy the ending, not just the story wise, and I'm not gonna give any spoilers. Not even just story wise. I didn't like the story resolution of it. That was one thing, but the process of the ending, because it was, and I had heard this, it is so like almost impossibly difficult that it just. And then it's like not only impossibly difficult, then the actual payoff of it is not all that satisfying. So it can be very frustrating ending experience. So what I'll say is, this is an excellent process of a game or journey of a game, but just adjust expectations and even like bring expectations way down for the ending so that you're not disappointed. Because I kind of almost had a bit of a Game of Thrones experience with this, where like I enjoyed the show. I haven't read the book.
You were very upset.
I was very it was like, and upset for a couple of. So I'm going to give the rating. So the rating that I'm going to give this is a 7.5. This would have been way higher, potentially even in my top 10, had it not been for the way that the ending was managed. And so if you don't want any spoilers, just jump the timestamp up. So there's
no spoilers.
I won't give any spoilers.
No.
But no, what I'm going to say is the way that it was managed. It's not just thematically what happened, is the process. It's like, it's very hard not to kind of, the punishment that you get depending on the choices that you kind of take throughout the game is not only just very harsh, but also completely almost not connected to then the ending that was decided for the story. So it's like, well, if you're going to be so punishing about this, how does this relate to this ending? So anyways, so this is a mixed bag of emotions for me, because one, I love the journey. Did not enjoy the experience.
That's an interesting thing, because if the game wasn't so good in the beginning and didn't make you so invested in the story, then you wouldn't have been so disappointed at the end. Like, it's interesting how it's like the best, like you said, the best of times and the worst of times, because
you work so hard that you really want to pay off. But it's like, this is one where you have to go in knowing, I'm going to work so hard for the sake of working hard, because that's the bit that's fun. I don't know if So sorry to end on a note, but it's like, that was kind of like the, what? Like, that was my experience with the ending. It's like
Yeah. And also, in case you haven't heard already, the game looks like it should be suited to probably a young audience. It covers themes that are definitely not suited for a younger audience, or at least need some adult supervision.
It definitely does, yeah.
Maybe read ahead.
It can get quite dark.
Yes.
Like, there's some things that indeed get quite dark.
Might need a bit of an explanation.
It just had so much potential. Like, it could have been so great. And then the end.
Sounds like there are elements that were great.
Oh, absolutely. The game process is really great.
Yeah.
And then the ending was just a mess. But that's just my own subjective experience. Some people are going to, potentially really connect with it. And so just take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, well, like all of our reviews,
like
really. So this was a bit of a mixed bag. We hope that this was helpful in some way. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.